Hello and welcome to the Coaching Podcast, Coaching for Success in Sport and Business. Your host is Emma Doyle, the energy and high performance under pressure coach who is a world leader in unleashing human potential. Buckle up for this high octane session. Let them have it, coach.
G'day everybody and welcome to the Coaching Podcast. I have the pleasure today of interviewing a fellow cricket lover. I certainly got my jaw smacked out once in an indoor cricket match. That was super fun. But back to Harry, as we love to call him, recently retired from the Australian Defence Force after almost 30 years. He's a psychologist, runs a human performance consultancy, helping create high-performance people, cultures, and teams, focusing on enhancing leadership, organisation capabilities to ensure high performance and effectiveness. Not only that, a lead singer, songwriter. This is going to be a crazy interview. I'm so excited. Welcome to the show, Harry, and how are you?
Good, thanks, Emma. It's good to be here.
All right. Well, listen, we'll jump straight into it. It is our first question. I'm going to go anchovies on a pizza. You either love them or you strongly dislike them. What's your take, Harry?
Look, I ebb and flow. Sometimes I feel like some anchovies and other times I don't. I like them, I suppose, is the main answer.
All right. Because you answered that way, could you start with a moment in your career that went really, really well, either as a coach, as a leader?
Yeah, I guess the highlight, and I use that cautiously because in warfare, highlights come at a cost always. But you know, the most satisfying mission that I completed was a parachute operation insertion into the mountains of Afghanistan at night with a team of around 30 operators and a dog and an interpreter. Now, that's pretty funny, strapping people to your front and jumping out at night. That's the first time they've ever jumped out of a plane, so it's not too funny for them. But I think, you know, very high risk event, as you can imagine, and trying to bring everything together, convince not only the operators, but the command that we can do it to execute the mission, which we did successfully without breaking in, without firing a shot, which is, you know, the SAS's true remit. And I guess, you know, there's obviously, it's a large story and there's a lot more to it, but it really came towards the back of my career. And it really highlighted a few things for me in the lead up to that jump and that mission and executing that mission. We did a lot of night operations and rehearsals, and it wasn't until I was standing on the ramp at 18,000 feet looking down into the mountains with, you know, only a couple of minutes out before we dispatched the sortie or the group, our group, into the night air, that I was overwhelmed with a sense of fatigue and right at the moment when I really needed to be the most switched on, I just had a moment to pause and realize how tired I was. And I kind of a fleeting moment in my mind as thoughts come and go. I'd been up for the 5 nights prior to that. And it was probably the first time, or now that I reflect back on how important self-care is. And it's not so much about health and well-being and feeling good. I get all of that stuff. It's actually really important to the mission and to be able to be at your best. You know, I was going to bed at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and waking up at 6 to do other tasks. And you, in the throes of everything and the heightened arousal around, you know, focus and attention that we bring to things, that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned out of that. And I, you know, there's amongst many, because I think after a long career, that was a culmination of a whole bunch of things I think that really went well. And those moments are fleeting as well. You know, normally you win ugly, you do your best on the day and get through it and win or succeed. And then occasionally it goes absolutely to plan, and that's rare. So that's why it sticks with me.
Yeah, nice. Thank you for sharing that. And I love the message around the more we take care of ourselves as well. It's obvious, but the more we can take care of others and coach them through wherever they're at. So thank you for sharing that, Harry. What about on the flip side, mate? Can you think of a moment that didn't go well and what might be a lesson or two?
Yeah, there's been a few. And again, I guess, you know, through the military lens, there's many moments of you know, trauma and adversity in the context of combat and war fighting. The hardest moments are seeing your mates getting hurt, seeing civilians getting hurt, those types of things. I lost a friend in 2008 Sean McCarthy was killed in an IED ambush, improvised explosive device. I was driving the car. We hit the IED and were ambushed. I was returned home to Australia, wounded in action, and I spent a lot of time in bed on intravenous antibiotics and other drugs. And so strangely had the longest break I've had from during my career, which strangely, and just a lot of time to think. I was already kind of interested in psychology and studying philosophy, but two things struck me during that time, laying in bed by myself and in quite a depressed mode for a long period. Firstly, what was I going to do? At that stage, my leg was badly infected, and the doctors had already spoken that if it doesn't get better soon, we'll have to remove part or all of your leg. And so that posited the question, what was I going to be beyond a gunslinger, and how was I going to provide for my family? You don't earn a lot of money being a soldier, that's for sure. Even special ops soldiers are humbly paid, modestly paid. And the other part was, how was I going to get my body back, and how, if I wanted to get back, if at the other end, if I didn't lose my leg, and how was I going to get back? And the first was just education. I decided then to really double down on my education. That was going to be one of the main variables that would contribute to success if the worst case happened. And that's when I really supercharged my study. But the study, it's often said, soldiers don't have time to study. It's rubbish. In fact, I think it brought more order, certainly curbed a bit of partying on weekends and things like that. The other part was, how was I going to get back? And I realised that, to get my body back to full strength, I'd lost maybe 15 kilos. I was down from 85 to 70 or even less. I'd go to the gym, go to the strength and conditioning guys, and struck me that I'd need to do the same for my mind, because I was pretty, low and I was full of self-doubt, shame. I'd been returned with an infection. Who gets returned from the battlefield with a simple infection? I felt guilt and shame for having been driving the car and hitting the ID. So there was a lot of work to do, I realised. So I just engaged with psychs, and in a fashion, analogous to the gym, I set about using discovered mental tools, and they've become something I'm infatuated with and learning more about. And again, it aligned with and helped drive my passion for psychology and more on the performance side rather than the mental health side. But I still do a lot of both.
Thank you for sharing that moment. It can't have been easy. And the importance of self-reflection, isn't it? The mental gym. All of us go to the gym, no problem. Pop it in the diary, but we don't often pop the mindset stuff in the diary as well, which is equally as important. So thank you again, just for sharing that story. Which really, the next question, you've already shared a huge sliding doors moment, but that is our next sort of defining moment where your life really makes a dramatic turn in one direction or the other. Can you share another sliding doors moment in your life?
Yeah, I kind of pulls all of those together. I think the most significant inflection point, certainly something that I think changed how I think about how I thought about the future up until that point, was towards the end of my career, and I started a foundation for educating soldiers while they're still serving. So, there's a lot of support for veterans out in the world, and sometimes I think too much, but that's another issue. But I think I started a foundation. I had a move I had such a great experience with my own education, and soldiers, as I said, are humbly paid, and certainly education, if you've got a family, is a big expense. So I set the foundation up, and I'm glad to say it's going great guns. It's very, very successful, and we've put a lot of soldiers through education during their career. So when they hit the end of their career, they're ready to go, or more prepared, rather than hitting the end and then going, what do I do now? Go off to uni. That's just not an option for most of them, or to go and study to be a carpenter, or to do small business, or become a writer, whatever they want to do. And I held a lunch in Melbourne at a place called the Kelvin Club. We raised $1 million at that lunch, which was mind-blowing in itself. But I met two people that that influenced my life, Andrew Burns and Adrian Redlick, and they're both business people, and they both essentially said, one of them said, I want you to come and meet with me once a month for the next 12 months. And here's my card, give me a call, set it up. Basically, it was just, a bit of mentoring and whatnot. And the other one said, I want you to come and work with me. I want you to work a day a week, just come in, sit in on meetings, etc. And those, up until that point, I thought, I'm going to do it all myself. I'm going to build this business. Or I'm going to do psychology. I didn't really know. I didn't really have a structure to what I was doing. I was well prepared, well planned, but it was kind of a bit of a, 50% strategy and 50% hope. And I thought if I worked hard enough, I'll be right. Those two moments then, when I look back, the generosity, the aptitude to kind of look and see and want to help. And I think, it's a message I give to businesses and people that it's the simplest things that you can do to help people. It doesn't have to be veterans or whoever, whatever group. Good leadership is about recognizing that your 10 seconds with someone can have a profound or disproportionate or asymmetric effect. For example, CEOs, I say to them, walk the floor, go around and just spend a few minutes with someone that your business might have grown to 100 people now, and you hardly know the people at the fringes. It gives an opportunity for that young person to go home and say to their partner, well, the CEO come around and saw me today, and we were chatting, and just give them, and those moments can really make much more difference than putting in hours to meetings and hours to this. Of course, there's lots to do, but I think that's changed the way I looked at things, and certainly those two figures have loomed large in who I want to be now. 55 years old, I still aspire to be something fresh and different, and I've adopted that kind of mindset myself. I think it's just by simple moments and offerings.
Yeah, we definitely never know sometimes the impact that we can have, and what 10 seconds means to someone else we might not even realize. We had someone on the podcast recently, explain it as the shadow leader at 5 o'clock. Your shadow is huge, and that's as a leader, that's how people interact with us. There's a lot of value in the simplicity of 10 seconds, or just walking the floor and getting to know your people. So it's
a metaphor for life, cricket, combat. I'll say that that metaphor, to extend it, combat is 99% just boring, banal, sitting around in the dirt, hoping that the coffee's hot, hoping to get a letter from the family, hoping to hear that you're going to be back in the base for a shower soon. And then it's 1% of extreme, excitement, terror, whatever the case may be. Cricket, test match cricket, real cricket, can be the same. It can be session upon session of just graft and grind, and then moments of highlight. And I think life's like that too. We idealize life sometimes, that you're in it and you're on it all the time, but it's just not true. Most of it's hard graft and grind, no matter what position you're in life. And I think in accepting that and understanding that, I think there's some comfort. Be prepared for the moments that count. That's
yeah, love it, love it. What about our guiding question on the podcast? We ask everybody in 1 to a maximum of 3 words. What do you think makes a great coach?
Listening. Yeah, I'd probably actually just slightly adapt that to hearing, because I think lots of people listen. Well, maybe it's the other way around, but I think you know what I mean. It's just, there's a difference between sitting and waiting for someone to speak. We all know this, and actually hearing someone. And then there's an emotional thing where you can actually empathise, where you can lean into your kind of mirror neurons, whatever they are. Our best understanding is that we empathise through not only relating from memories, but we actually relate physiologically and biologically with people when they tell their stories, because they're not different stories. All of us have the same life experiences, the same ebbs and flows. We have a finite endowment, biological endowment, that's very, very similar. We all have 2 legs, 2 eyes, and I think there's a similarity there in our cognitive abilities and framework. But hearing people or listening, that kind of deeper level that I'm talking about, is actually, that empathic listening. I think then, really hearing people is an art. No, I think it's rare. I really do. I sit in a lot of meetings with either boards or executives or football coaching departments, whatever, and you can kind of see the people who are listening and who are thinking, who are applying themselves mentally to the task at hand, and you can see the people who aren't. And it's not a laziness, although, I'd say there's a few people in the room who switch off, maybe don't like the person that's talking, so they're defensive, or don't like the idea that's being talked about because it wasn't theirs or whatever. But there's also this notion of a mind has a mind of its own. And you're fighting that all the time. And so you, even in meetings or sitting with people one-on-one in coaching relationships, or you're sitting with someone debriefing mental health, significant mental health issues, not just anxiety and stress, but disorders or something like that, or triaging as we do. You're fighting your mind. Your partner just pops into your head at the moment. Someone's really, pouring their heart out to you, or you think about something ridiculous, football or a coffee mug or something. So I think that's the thing about listening that I'm talking about, is actually being able to fight through their own noise in your head, not just environmentally, and be able to stay tuned in. And then the longer you can do that, I think that's when you tune in those empathic or mirror neurons, or that part of your brain that literally simulates what the person's talking about and describing, rather than just going, oh yeah, I've been there and done that.
And also just saying, oh yeah, I hear you. But actually, when it comes back to saying what they actually said, it's amazing how many times people get that wrong, and me included. When I think that I've really listened to my client, and then I'm like, so what I'm hearing is, and then when I try and repeat what it is that I heard, and they're like, oh, that's not quite it. And so that's a great way to even test your own ability to hear what somebody's saying. As a coach, I think it's such an important skill.
If I tune out, it is, and it's we're not good at it. Speaking is not what the purpose of words and all the rest of it is. It's kind of a contrite, but it's to make sense of all the chatter in our head. That's 90% of all your chatter goes inside your head, and then the rest of it's kind of just cursory outside. You're with yourself, obviously, 24 hours a day. 90% is a throwaway line. I've got no evidence to support that, of course, but I'm just saying the majority, and 51%, let's even just call it that, of the chatter is with yourself. So, I'll often I'll catch myself and I'll say that again. Just say what you just said again. And for whatever reason, I think that's actually a functional tool, because in coaching and counselling and debriefing, it's about feedback. You want the person to hear themselves talking as well. And I think this is a key part of understanding making sense of what's going on inside our heads, and hearing ourselves talk. Those moments where you go, shit, that didn't sound particularly articulate, or geez, I'm swearing a lot, or I'm not making any sense. I'm just rambling on to fill the space because I'm self-soothing and trying to make myself feel good. I think that's good. If I'm in those positions, I just sorry, say all that again for me, just so I'm clear, and that helps me.
That's such a simple one. Say that again. I'm definitely going to use that.
If I find myself giving solutions, I pull myself up too. That's another test. I go, hold on, I'm giving them a solution at the moment. Poor technique, or squatting with a poor technique, they're running with a poor technique. You can give solutions if they're decision making, but if they're trying to understand and unpack a psychological concept in their own mind, if you find yourself giving a solution, I think that's also a sign that you maybe need to pick deeper or listen harder. I have this kind of aversion to providing solutions. I'd rather sit for 90 minutes in a session and get them to come up with a light bulb moment at the 88th minute, and generally it'll happen. So that's another thought I've got around. I think I'm averse to giving solutions where it's not evidently obvious that it's required.
You just summarized one of the reasons why I do this labor of love, this podcast, because I'm of that philosophy, and I've come from giving solutions as a tennis technical expert, my chapter 1, to when I studied business coaching and understanding that the answers live within the person. So that's why this podcast is about coach for success in sport and business, because if sports coaches can learn to do more of this process of, hearing and allowing them to solve their own problems, I think we can just learn so much from each other. So it's one of the reasons I have the podcast. And it sort of lends beautifully into our final official question, is where we ask you to ask us a question.
Look, I'm fascinated in what motivates people. It's generally similar things, but there's nuance to that. It's a hard question, that one, because it's different for everyone. I want something different out of everyone I meet. If I go, I've been lucky enough to go to NASA, for example. That's a key memory in my mind and something I reflect on a lot. And all I wanted to do was find out about the program that was being run there. That's what our business is about now, finding out what is a high performance program for a hedge fund or a business group, high performing team, whatever that is in that context. I'm interested in programs there. If I'm speaking to that, if I'm speaking to a medical team, 5 people in an emergency medical team, my question is curiosity around how do you swarm and what do you do in the moments after you've swarmed and you're standing there in the emergency department receiving communications. There's been multiple casualties and there's this and that and all the rest, and preparing. How do you grow empathy quickly? How do you bond quickly? Because you're about to go into an immersive event that is going to test you, your patience, your rationality, everything else, and you need to lean on each other. And so it's a very difficult question in football. In football departments, I'd say, how do you hold this rock show together? Because once you go into these places, you realise how almost how they win in spite of themselves, because you couldn't win a war the way that football department and sports clubs run. You couldn't win a war. They're so disorganised. But I get it. It's just you're in the battle from so there's all different things, Emma. I'm thankful that my mother and father bestowed or endowed in me, a personality that's naturally curious. I've got mild ADHD, and I like that. I hope I never change. It makes me a bit disorganised, but it certainly makes me energised. So I think being naturally curious, and you can foster that, you can nurture that, and you can develop that in yourself. And that just being curious, I wonder what makes that person tick or that team good, or what do they struggle? I think that's just, But what I would say is if you do have an opportunity, if you're sitting beside someone who you know nothing about, ask questions. That's the great way to develop, because once you get into it, you go, wow, this is amazing, and learn so much.
Totally agree with that. One of the reasons I did want to invite you on the show is because of a presentation I had the fortunate of experience in January in Brisbane, hearing you talk. And so I wanted to go there next. I'd love for you to share what you were telling us about the emergency department. So if we can go back to the medical example, I thought it was fascinating around the debrief.
Yeah, I'll borrow here from the Mission Critical Team Institute from Dr. Preston Klein, amongst others, and military processes. So they're not my own, none of our thoughts are our own thoughts really. But on that day we were talking about, meetings, coaching, intense moments, etc. And the way I kind of broach it is to use the emergency medical team. When you think about emotions and rational decision making, you sit in a boardroom on a finance deal, it's all pretty boring, mundane. Essentially glorified banks, bank tellers, not to dis bank tellers, but it's a little bit more complex. But there's nothing on the line really, other than a bit of some dollars. But in a medical department and a football team, similar. There's a bit more on the line. It's in sports. There's harm. And you're also in the public sphere, so there's that's can be consequential. Treating how they come together, how they swarm is insightful. Accident event happens, hospital's notified, lead doctor comes up with a plan and then has to build a team that's fit for those injuries and bring that team together. And they come from anywhere in the hospital, doing any job at that time, get paged, they have to drop what they're doing and swarm. And this is it's kind of teaming in high speed. And there's this moments when they first come together and it's all briefing and it's transactional information. And we're of the opinion, or we've come to the opinion, that in those moments there's an opportunity to just stop, take a breath, and empathise. And we know that works. We know that there's elements, indications of that in as much as they put their names on their heads, or what department they are, or what colour they like. There's all kinds of things, and this is them intuiting the world and saying we need to understand. There's an opportunity there for Doc to say, hey, we are about to go into a pretty emotional. There's 2 children, 5 adults, and it's going to be ugly. And I'm going to be direct, and I might swear, I might speak to you sternly, but once we leave this conversation, we're moving from a routine, cordial, flat structure into hierarchy, brief, or using brevity, no room for emotions, no room for taking offence. And just that simple 30-second setup, I think, can alleviate a lot of problems. And there have been problems over the years in emergency medicine and doctors and nursing staff and coming together. And you think about it, surgeons have got a lot going on. They talk about high trauma. They're cutting deliberately humans open and live in that world. And we think that just by treating routine environment and then immersing into these critical environments, pausing for a short period and just setting up the human mind and brain and expectation. So I hope that makes sense. They swarm, they come together, they try and storm very quickly, to use, I think it's Tuckman's model, and build some empathy. It might be as simple as going, hi, my name's such and such, I'm from such, I've got 2 children and I love fishing. We're still looking at that, but there's just something there to switch on, to storm. Go into the immersive event, give plenty of warning, set everybody up for it. It's going to be ugly. There'll be swearing. Someone will lose their temper. But when we come out the other side, exactly the same thing happens as we move from the critical phase, 20 hours later, we come out the other side. We do the same thing. How is everyone? In real time, guided out into the post-event environment, back into the routine. And the military and what we call the mission critical team world do this better than most. At the other end, the other part that you're talking here is the debrief. And, I remember speaking to a SEAL years ago who we were talking about military programming and human performance. We got onto the subject of hot washes and debriefing, after action reviews. He was saying when we get off the plane, in his team, not the Navy SEALs, like people generalise all these things to the SEALs or SOF or all the rest of it. You've got to understand some of these cool things only happen in small teams. The rest is kind of pretty benign. Traditionally, the hot wash is you get off the helo, you're still sweating, still hot barrel, blood's dripping off your hands from grazed knuckles, whatever the case may be, but you're still in the moment, you're still high active, everything's still visceral. And you stand in a circle, and you would go 1 kick, 1 kiss each. And the 2IC would take the notes, and we'd have a team of 6 blokes, and he'd say, a kick, something we did bad, kiss, something we did good. And we go around, and that was the debrief. But what we're moving to now, what we're thinking about now is, what about the feelings? That goes to the transactional, the technical, the performance, the metrics, the things that kind of, that matter apparently, but it doesn't build a story around how it felt. And so why is that important? Because, you could have really pissed someone off as a leader and made a decision or done something that pissed them off. And if that's left to just harbour and fester, that can turn into cynicism in the team, and then that has ongoing effects. Someone might have really had a traumatic reaction or seen a child hurt or something like that, and they've got children. So you know where I'm going with that. So he was offering, saying, well, maybe we should have a kick, and how do you feel? What was the biggest emotion? For some people it might be elation to finally be in a combat situation where they've been able to test their skills, and after testing that, I think that's got so much merit. And Preston Klein and Claire Murphy, who are colleagues, will talk about what story are you telling about yourself and about the job that you do and the organisation you're in. What is the narrative? Have we all got completely different narratives? And if that's the case, is that a problem? Or are we all sharing in the same story and building the same narrative? And is that truer than if we just build our own individual stories? I hope that makes sense. And to finalise that, the hot wash, get off the helicopter, for example, or jump out the plane. You give your kiss, kick, and how you felt throughout. then you go for a shower, and an hour later or whatever, that's when you have your debrief, where the rationals kind of come back to be. You've had time to reflect, and you'll sit around. We'd sit around with a beer or a coffee or whatever, and go take a deeper dive on the kiss and the kick, etc. And then all of those notes and all those thoughts then flow into an after action review, which is done up to 24 hours later, and that goes into a playbook. And that's another thing the military, I think, do well, and that's where you capture your lessons learned, corporate knowledge, etc. And that playbook, I remember my playbook, or the playbook that I was privileged to steward for a while, traveled with us everywhere, and that had just about everything in it that we do. I think it's an electronic one. So anyway, long-winded way, but I hope I've covered. There's a big field that we're kind of looking at with a small group, and other people I know are too, and I hope that kind of captures it.
Well, it really does, because one of the things that constantly I'm finding, especially in corporate America, is that everyone's so time poor. So that stuff, and I don't know how you feel about, or the military feels about, the soft skills, like asking how somebody feels. I mean, you're meant to be these tough guys in these suits, and not just, I'm sure, in the military, but also we all, in the workplace, we put on that facade, and we're so busy doing our job, and everyone's so time poor, especially the managers and the leaders, that they actually don't often prioritize how important these hot washes are. And I love even the language around it. It's not something that that's not a common. Well, I'd never really heard of that until your presentation that day. And it's such an easy, quick thing to say, hey, did you do a hot wash after the match or after the deal went down? I think it's something that we can all learn from, and then create a playbook is something so simple for us to all be a part of that one story. So yeah, I really loved what you shared. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I know that you also believe in this peer-led reflective process, or coachee-driven process. Could you share a bit more around that?
The peer support and peer learning and peer debriefing, I think, it just strikes me as the most powerful level of feedback. This is, again, I've got no evidence to support. And just going back to speaking to evidence, it's funny, we've got more, people say they're time poor, but we've got more recreational time than we've ever had in human history. There's never been a time where we've had more time. And I think it's called Parkinson's law. I'm kind of thinking on the run here. If you've got an hour to pack your bag and get to the airport, you'll take an hour. If you've got 5 days, you'll start packing, so you'll fill the room that you've got with stuff. And I've got to be honest, in a lot of business settings, I just see a lot of nebulous, there's some serious stuff that needs to occur, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of nebulous nothingness going on in the back, and it kind of is just busy work. And I think that there's something in that. An easy way to move the needle on some of these investment teams is to I call it the brown noise. There's white noise and black noise. That's the yes and no and the decision making. But there's a lot of brown noise. I think you know what I mean. Going on in there. Going back to peer led. So as simple as I can put it is, I would say to anyone listening, put a bunch of your peers from the team together, whether that's, if you've got a team of 30, you've probably got 5 middle managers, or, to put them, give them a chance to go in a room and spend time and debrief together. They'll probably learn more about each other not each other, but they'll learn more about where they're at in their careers, etc. They'll be having the same problems. They'll be pissed off by the same bosses. They'll be complaining about the same staff. And I think in sports, there's I've seen it be really. In fact, in tennis, I remember speaking to a room full of peers. That was kind of, it seems quite natural in tennis. I don't know what that is, but it's quite flat and been very powerful in peers sharing and supporting. And I think that's what comes out of leading peer support, opportunities, is that because they can align with each other and relate to each other at a professional level. I think that's far easier. You take the power dynamics out of it, you take the money out of it, you take the motivations generally closer than it probably is between a boss, a middle manager and staff. It's not to say that you shouldn't be building relationships all around you. You kind of you lead in 5 directions: up, down, peers, stakeholders, and yourself. But I think it's at the peer level where I've seen it work the best. And if you're more, a lot of the practice and a lot of the self-help online and all the rest of it, it's kind of the wild west of bloody mental skills and human performance and self-help at the moment. But there's, the difference is the teams who are deliberate about these things and who have the discipline to do them again and again and again till they get better at them. I think that's the key. And so what I'm saying there is you might think, oh, I'll just chuck the peers down, and they sit around and go, no, that wasn't very worthwhile, or that didn't work very well. Some will. It's not an excuse not to do it. A lot of organisations are bad at these practices and these processes, and that's because they're just bad at them. They don't know. They've got to practice. You've got to crawl before you walk, and so. But when I've seen the good teams and the people who do it naturally, I think that peer support is a force multiplier when it gets right. And again, the military and medicine do this really well. We know that it works in humans. At the end of the day, we're all endowed with the same opportunity from the start. Of course, there's limitations to that, to saying that, but generally speaking, and I think if you look across to the military and medicine and police, mission critical teams, there's a lot of lessons to learn. It's kind of our business model at Stoughton. I think that those approaches, whilst they're not intuitive and they don't fit and they might not suit everybody, I think there's a lot to learn and transfer across, and we're on a journey to find out exactly what that is.
The Coaching Podcast is sponsored by the Samson Agency, a boutique talent agency managing entertainers, artists, and athletes. You can learn more at thesamsonagency.com. And if you're interested in becoming a coach, check out opendoorcoachingusa.com for all our latest courses in Leader as Coach and our high-performance workplace coaching certification. Now let's get back to the show. And your book is called 11 Bats. Congrats on writing your memoir in 2020.
Thank you.
Tell me about symbolism and just taking the bats on the different tours that you went on.
Yeah, well, my cricket background is I've played for 20 years for Applecross Cricket Club, and I'm still available for selection. I'm close to 100 two-day games, which is a thing. I'd love to get to nail that. Played a lot of one day and the pajama cricket, 2020 and one day stuff. But so the club particularly during the most intense period of my service from 2000 to 2015. The cricket club was a place where I could go and be Harry. It was kind of, there's this concept of the third place where, your family and your work are the first two, and your third place is where you can be selfish to a degree, and that's okay. So it was always there, and I grew up. I will say I feel like I've got an esteemed backyard cricket background. I often say my father's, the Don Bradman of backyard cricket. He's one of the greatest backyard cricketers, and that's a bold statement, but you can get away with it. No one owns backyard cricket, and so cricket's always been there for me. And certainly, back when I was a Navy brat, we'd arrive at a new base, had to get posted, and one of the quickest way to build rapport with the kids in the streets. Back in those days, kids were running wild all over the streets, and I hope to see that again one day, because I think it's a great sign that a society's thriving when kids are running and bike riding around on the streets late at night. Not late at night, but as they used to. And you break out a game of cricket, and the kids coming from everywhere. It didn't matter, and everyone gets a bat and everyone gets a bowl, and that's the essence of cricket that I really like. So, when I started deploying in that intense period, I took a cricket bat and ball on every deployment I went on. Over that period, I had 11 major deployments, and I took a bat on each one, and it was my habit to get everyone to sign that bat at the end of the deployment. And nothing really came of the bats. They just kind of sat in a box. But during that time, the reason for the bat was I've always intuitively, and I think very consciously and deliberately, been aware of morale. And morale in the civilian sense is, I guess, organisational well-being and resilience and all of the fluff kind of words in the psychology realm. that describe what it feels like to be in a team. And I've always had an intuitive. I'm a bit of a larrikin, a bit of a energized guy, as you can probably tell, and love humour. I think I'm funny. That'll do. I'm happy if I think I'm funny. And so cricket became an artifact of that. You bust out, everyone can play cricket. As I said, you can have a dozen people playing and enjoying it all at the same time. And it played this significant role. Very quickly, I realised in warfare that it played a role. So it played a role in recovery, coming back from traumatic events. You'd see guys come back and people think you're this stoic soldier that's clinking Viking jugs and that's just not the truth. When some of the business is very serious and very draining, I'm sure you can imagine, and people come back pretty flat, pretty deflated. And so I saw someone would pick up the bat and ball and go for a hit, and then another person would join, and before long the shoulders were relaxing and the jaws were relaxing, and then there's an appeal and a joke and a sledge, and I saw it unwind a team in front of a very tense team in front of my eyes. It builds rapport with locals. You're in the streets of Kabul or Islamabad and you break out a bat and a ball, and before you know it, the kids are coming around and it builds rapport. And in fact, you probably don't even think about this, but street urchins in those environments are your best first form of defence. They know everyone, they see everyone come and go, and if you share a bit of Shiranee with them and have a odd game of cricket with them, and they'll come up and say, Mister, this guy, he's no good. And, so anyway, I digress. And then we've even used it for intelligence gathering. Up in the hills of Timor-Leste, we used a game of cricket to subvert journalists and spies who were hiding in amongst them and coming up to visit, significant players in the Timorese conflict and emergency to play cricket, almost like a Hogan's Heroes ruse, So it loomed large and played a significant role over those times. And in the end, those bats took them out of the box and dusted them off, and the Shrine of Remembrance got onto them, and we held an exhibition down there, and that's how the journey to the book started. It was a nice way to scaffold the story and soften the blow too, because I think it's arrogant to come out of the SAS and write a book. So I was worried about that, and I felt that the bats allowed me to have a soft landing in that case, and I'm glad to report that's how it's played out. It's not a tell-all book at all. It's just an honest bloke, so I hope, an honest story about a bloke who kicked around overseas and played a bit of cricket and done some other stuff. So, and those artifacts, I think, are important. Again, it comes back to the rituals, routines, and artifacts that military have. At time, there's a feeling in the mission critical team that the tradition and history of these kind of sometimes very stale institutions, pale stale mail, if you want to put it one way. There's parts of it that we need to evolve. We need to move on because there's a more sophisticated human coming through the gates. But we don't want to throw it out in spite of, and lose all of that, because there is a time to sit down and deliberately and pause and reflect on what we need to lose and what we need to keep. And that's a key discussion, Emma, that's going on inside mission critical teams at the moment around the world. We're going to New York and London this year to talk, in a pretty limited forum about how do old military units of hundreds of years old repurpose, but adapt to the change. Talking about organisational change in businesses, they've got nothing on these institutions. They're all Marines. They've been around for 500 odd years. So, and it's a fascinating area. So those artefacts of cricket bats, I hope, stay, and maybe some of the old attitudes of cricket will evolve.
Yeah, and come out of the box. You never know. Yeah. They might. Definitely take them to New York with you. I can assure you that's a.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to take them on the road. I always say to my wife that she goes, "Those bloody bats, get them out of here," because I've got them everywhere and they're in the dark, and I'm worried about the signatures fading. And I say, "Hey, those bats, they'll pay for our last mortgage for our end of days house." So maybe. But they're unique, Emma. They really are. They're mine, but I haven't seen. I think the names And the people that are in those bats, just the stories in those bats are amazing. And I think it makes me kind of chill a little, when I think about it.
Yeah. One last little tip for coaches out there.
Yeah, definitely. Look, we really are in a wild west, particularly psychology and self-help. And I think there's just so much out there, different opinions. They all come back to some pretty basic and fundamental things. So be curious, but be cautious. In psychology, and I think this is really key for any coach, regardless of your background and qualifications. But in psychology, one thing I've learned, and you train for 7 years to become a coach in psychology, and you need to be master's level. That's kind of where it's at, and that might be easy to discount, but it's not. You spend hundreds of hours practicing and honing before you're unleashed. And the one thing that's kind of really drummed into you is do no harm. Now, I think that's such a key principle that I get around on some coaching websites, and I upgrade because there's so much good stuff out there and great courses. In the Australian Coaching Institute, I think it is here, the ACI or S, I can't remember offhand, but some great tools and great resources, and we tap into those. But the fundamental thing in psychology is that you just question yourself all the time. Do no harm, do no harm, no, do no harm. Now, as a rule, 99 out of 100 people, anytime you stop and allow people to reflect and hold a mirror to them is a good practice. So there's nothing wrong there. But I think with everything that's going on, all self-help and all that type of stuff, it's just make sure what you're preaching is evidence-based, that it has an evidence base, has a strong evidence base, not your evidence base. Double down on that, because every 100 times you may give someone hope who really needs it in a deep and profound psychological way related to mental health. And if they don't get it, that can actually cause harm. And so there is a bit of a movement. I think it's percolating through within the psychology realm to posit this in the best possible way. But evidence, and you just make sure, because it's intuitive to you, and this includes for me. I remind myself all the time, because it's intuitive to me or I do it, then it doesn't make it suitable for everyone. In Mission Critical Team Institute, we have the tacit knowledge transfer problem. We're fascinated with it. We'll never ever get to the bottom of it, because it's to do with the mind, and no one's got a bloody clue what's going on in there, with all of the drowning in data of neuroscience and everything. No one's got a clue what's going on. And but so the tacit knowledge transfer is kind of where at the heart of coaching. That's one of the things. So look that up if you're listening. Dive into it. It's kind of at the core of what you do. But just because you're good at a thing doesn't make you good at coaching a thing. Just because you're experienced at a thing doesn't make you good at teaching a thing. Just because you're good at building a thing doesn't make you good at explaining a thing. And that's the challenge we all need to correct, to check ourselves on. So long-winded way of saying do no harm. I think that's a really nice way to posit it. You don't have to sit there with every person running that through your mind, but I think when you're going through your evidence, think about the one person, 100 or 1 in 1,000 that you might influence, and one facet of that is giving false hope or actually giving advice that's counter to their individual difference.
Well, thank you so much, Harry. From say that again, the simplicity of empathetic listening, so that we can hear what people are saying, not solving the problems for them, and do no harm. I appreciate your time and your effort and your energy to be on the show here today. And I'm sure everyone's going to enjoy this episode as much as I have. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Emma. Good luck.
And if you enjoyed this episode of the Coaching Podcast, please share it with a fellow coach. And thanks for listening.